Welcome to the workshop in Masterclass Learning Series 2021, presented at the 10th edition of BMO IFFSA Toronto 2021, the largest South Asian film festival in North America. And one of the highlights of this year is a celebration of the centenary of the late and great Indian master Satyajit Ray. And today we are fortunate enough to have our very own contemporary master with us, Richie Mehta, a homegrown Canadian filmmaker of South Asian origin, who has done us proud ever since he started his career a few years ago. Hello, Richie, and welcome.
Hi, Naman. Thank you. You're way too kind, but thank you.
Right. So let's just jump right in. Now, the theme of this conversation is journeys. And Richie is someone who's actually undertaken several journeys. He's of South Asian origin. He's from Canada. He's journeyed to India to make his films. He's made films in Canada, and he journeyed to the UK for love, and where he remains. And so let's begin with your journey. How did you get into filmmaking? And why?
Well, it was very straightforward, actually. But the why is I simply watched them when I was growing up and loved movies so much of all walks, American, Canadian, European, very much Indian. And I just found that it was it was how I was learning about the world the most. My parents loved movies. They would bring home movies. When I was 3 or 4, I would watch them and fall asleep every night, and then get up early before anyone else in the house was, and go downstairs and finish the movie because I had fallen asleep in it. So I just loved watching them, and then I started to learn and understand over time. I think I was 4 when I first realized that these were not real, that they were just constructions that people had made, and that was real revelation for me. So I was intended on trying to figure them out, but certainly I didn't know a pathway into. I didn't have anyone in the family who was making movies. So even through school and high school, I was focusing on the science and math like a good Indian boy, but always doing art on the side, drama on the side, whatever I could get those done. Until at the end of high school, I just switched. At the last moment, I just switched to fully engaging with drama and art. And because that's all that was offered. There was no filmmaking course in our high school. And then I went into a university program, which was art-based, painting, sculpture, photography, because I figured if I ever go into movies, I need to understand as many liberal arts as I can that feed into movie making. So I spent 4 years in undergrad.
And where was this?
This was at University of Toronto,
okay.
And Sheridan College. It was a college, and it was like a vocational / academic training program all in one. And that was instrumental in me learning to make movies, because I approached each project as an art project, this is an idea I have that I want to talk about in some way, and how do I see it through in different forms and mediums. Until my 4th year of university, I just started making films. I just had gravitated after working with clay and wood and photochemicals in photography and acrylic and oil on canvases. And I said, you know what, I've spent enough time with that now to know that I think the medium of choice for me is in fact what I thought it was, which is now just making films. And then I went to a postgrad film program.
Which one?
At Sheridan, they had just opened a new program called Advanced TV and Film for postgraduates, 1 year. Very technical, very hands-on, directing, editing, cinematography, producing, sound design, those kinds of things, and very competitive. Within the program, you had to pitch a concept in the first 2 weeks of school, and if it was accepted by the instructors, you get to direct that, and if it wasn't, you have to work on somebody else's. So it was very cutthroat. Your whole education was determined by those first 2 weeks of pitching.
So in all of this, when did Anamika happen, your short film?
Oh wow, you've done your research. Yikes. By the way, I'm really proud of these short films in so much as they're not digitized. So they can never be, this is 2002 you're talking about, so they can't never be bootlegged. They can never be seep their way into the market. I have the beta tapes and no one does. So Anamika was the project I did, and the big one I did in big one. I mean, it was a 3-minute film, but first time it was just shot on Super 16 millimeter, and I spent a year working on it. That was that year, in fact, and it was a real instrumental project in my evolution, because I started off writing a 25-page script, which I pitched as a concept for Anamika, which is very much a film student-y idea. I didn't have much experience in the world, so it's about imagination as an idea. And it was accepted through the pitch, but then through the evolution of screenwriting, my profs wouldn't let me go to the next stage of pre-production. They kept saying my script was too long. And after about 5 months of this, and I was really frustrated, why didn't they let me? I finally figured out what was wrong with it, and the script needed to be 1 page, not 25. So the final script for Anamika was 1 page long, and that was the biggest lesson I learned from Anamika was economics and storytelling. Of the more you ask of an audience of time, the more they expect of you. The less you ask, the more kind they're going to be to you.
For those who are not aware, I think if I recall correctly, the Anamika is about a man in a cafe who sees a woman and he projects a kind of a Bollywood future on her, or a Bollywood make-believe reality on her.
How could you possibly know that?
It's my job.
Oh, that's very impressive. Yeah, exactly. So there's different versions. The dance, there's the fight against the villain who's non-existent, and then basically in the end, it's not like he gets the girl. He just ends up immersing himself in his imagination. Never comes out of it. It's actually quite a cynical daydreaming film. But what it was a way for me to not just mess around with a video camera. You had to use crews. You had to design it. You had to do everything properly with it. And so it gave me an excuse to go through the motions. That's really what it was in the end of the day.
So since this is a learning session, and a lot of aspiring filmmakers will be watching this as well. So now we are in 2021, where I can pick up my phone and make a film if I want to. I mean, obviously, you still have to go through the rigors of filmmaking. Yeah. But back in 2002, you said you shot on Super 16. It wasn't as easy or it was less easier then. It's never easy. So how did you get the funding? I mean, was it part of your curriculum?
That was part of the school. Yeah, they pay for the film stock and all the camera and all the equipment. You just pay for the processing, essentially, of the film, and everything else was paid for. Everyone is students who were working for free. So the only cost was the processing and conversion to digital tape. Everything else was covered to finishing on digital beta and a DVD with surround sound. They do the mix and everything. We did the mix. So that's what in fact, I went back to the program. I found a loophole after I graduated, went back and did a massive short film, which was a 25-minute science fiction film, which would have cost $500,000 in the marketplace.
This is the system
of units. Yeah, because the program was so good about resources that I realized I need to try this again and really practice again before I'm ready to go out professionally.
So what was the reception to these films, to both these shots? As in, did you send them anywhere, or was it?
Yeah, Anamika was instrumental. And by the way, one thing about, if you said about aspiring filmmakers, the thing about Super 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter, I shot something in 35. I was fortunate to assist on a project, which was the first student film shot in IMAX. The thing is, when you shoot these films, you turn on a camera, you hear and the first thing you think about, like a good Indian and a good filmmaker, is I'm burning money. That's my money going through the camera. And so the preparation, I would suggest that even if I had a phone right now, the phones are way better in terms of resolution than we ever had, better than the HD cameras we had back then. But I would approach it still that every time you press record, you're burning through money, even though you're not. And if you do that, then your preparation you do on your script and everything about filmmaking, by the time you turn on the camera, you kind of know that you're being as economical as you can at that stage. That training is really important. So I would approach it the same way as if I was shooting on film, if I was doing it on a phone. To answer your question now, Anamika was a real gateway film because I got into a few festivals especially in Toronto, and South Asian festivals, in fact. There was another one, Filmy, South Asian Festival, which was held with a big cultural festival called Masala Mendi Masti, which was on a weekend. And I submitted to that, got in, and I ended up meeting a community of South Asian artists in Toronto, cinematographers, visual effects artists, actors, who were also doing similar things, short films, trying to get into the scene. And I ended up connecting with that group, and that group was instrumental. I still work with many of them today, to me becoming a professional filmmaker, instrumental. And if I hadn't had Anamika, I wouldn't have gone into that world.
Yeah, and the sci-fi film?
Sci-fi film, so I spent a couple of years working on that. I really wrote the hell out of it with the producing partner of mine. And I mean, God, I spent so much time and energy on it, getting it right. Visual effects were crazy on it. It was like my attempt to do like a THX 1138. At the same time, I did an experimental, it wasn't experimental, I did an experiment, which was a narrative short, which was purely dependent on script and acting. No gimmicks, no visual effects. I didn't heavily production design it. It was just me practicing how to work with actors on a simple script. The actors I met at Filmy, in fact. And that short was Amal, the short. I did that at the same time as System of Units at night. Like I went to India very quickly for a quick trip with these people I met at Filmy. And I did it on the Christmas holidays while I was still at school doing System of Units, and came back. And as I was mixing and shooting and then editing and mixing System of Units during the day, at night, I would just go in by myself and do the editing on Amal. And then I got one guy at school to help me on the sound mix. And then those were done at the same time. And I sent them to festivals, and System of Units got into a few festivals. Amal got into everything. I mean, including London. It was the first time I came to London. Yeah. It sold everywhere. For me, it was like, I didn't even try on this film. I mean, it was an amazing short story my brother had written, but it was just an experiment in working with actors and text. And that's when I realized I need to I've worked now for about 5-6 years, very much trying to understand the craft. Now I need to stand back and let the material speak for itself. In fact, the lesson for that was, people, if you're going to choose between form and content, in my mind, audiences respond more to content.
Bless you.
Thank you. More to content first, then form. And I realized the form will come, but I need to work on the content. I need to have more life experience. That's what Amal taught me. The short.
So you said you met a bunch of people at Filmy. Was Rupinder Nagra one of them?
That's right. Yep, the first night of Filmy, I met him, yeah.
Wow, okay, because, Rupinder is phenomenal, he's one of our favorite people. Yes. So Amal is, as you said, based on a shot by your brother. It's about an auto rickshaw driver in Delhi who has an encounter with a wealthy person, and the rest, if you haven't seen, watch it. We can still watch it somewhere, right?
The short, you can, again, it's not digitized. Okay. Although it was on the DVD. I put it on the Canadian DVD I released. So if anyone would have that DVD, which was properly released in the market, the short film is on that. Otherwise, it's just a feature film.
So to go to Delhi and shoot in Delhi and get permissions, etc., obviously it requires a lot of resources. And
for the short film, you mean?
For the short film I'm talking about.
Yeah, we didn't have permissions. We just showed up and did stuff and left.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, that was honestly, it was the South Asian community that came together. I had no money. I had just graduated. I was, in my second round of film school. So in fact, the community that I had met at Filmy at large, we actually held a fundraiser in Toronto. And a bunch of the artists, there was my friend Gurpreet Janna, who was a tabla player, was another friend who was a beatboxer, other artists, singers, songwriters, spoken word artists. They came together and we had a night. It was $10 at the door. Bunch of South Asian kind of young people like us showed up. And what we raised that night, it was about $1,500, was all I used for the film. Everyone who worked on it flew their own way to India because they also wanted to go visit family. And I just said, give me 10 days in India. I'll cover your food, your accommodation. One of the camera operator had his own camera. So I bought some simple costumes, and that was it. It was very, very simple. We shot the whole thing for about $1,500.
So was that the beginning of your love affair with Delhi, or
Yeah.
were you already familiar with Delhi?
I wasn't familiar at all. I had gone when I was a kid, and I didn't connect with it at all. I found it a very abrasive environment. But that short film experience, going there for the first time on your own with colleagues and friends, it was so eye-opening for me. I mean, we stayed in Meroli in the Qutub Minar area, which is a beautiful, I think it's the most beautiful area of the whole city. And it was just a coincidence. We just got dumped there. And we found an apartment, and it was really an incredible adventure to get this thing done. And then after that, we all went to Rajasthan. We just said, let's just go to Jaisalmer. We're here, might as well. We went on this desert adventure. And that whole experience, those few weeks, and then I actually went to Bombay to visit a film. I had a connection in a film set. So it was a real experience of me understanding the type of movies I maybe would want to make, which is a little bit more guerrilla style on the streets. Life experience of shooting that thing, and also getting a taste of what it's like on a big budget set in Bombay, which rubbed me the wrong way right away.
Okay, I'm not going to ask you which movie that was.
Yeah, please don't. It's yeah.
So you spoke about the the South Asian community coming together. So which basically begs the question: how about your family? Wasn't there any pressure on you to become a lawyer, doctor, engineer?
No, none. In fact, I was very lucky that I didn't have that pressure. I sometimes I attribute it potentially to the fact that my parents divorced when I was a teenager, and there was a lot of issues that needed to be sorted in the family, and I just kind of carried on my way. And at that stage, I just worked really hard, and my parents both saw that he loves it. He's working really hard, and he keeps making progressive gains. They saw the work I did in school, on plays in high school. They saw the films I was making in university and post-grad. I started winning some small awards here and there. They were very supportive all the way through. I was very lucky. If I had to fight uphill on that, I don't know what energy I would have had. Though I never had a backup plan or an alternative. It was always this for me.
No, because you've kind of answered my next question, which is before filmmakers actually make it, before they start making money, there is always that period where that survival period where you're making your calling cards, your shots, and all of that, and a lot of people do not have that support, and sometimes they have to work other jobs to support this passion. So did you ever have to work any other job?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, I was always working something right out of school. I mean, during school and right out of school, I was doing corporate videos. And those were, $2,000, $3,000 a pop, very simple things, not like big ticket gigs, because I would just do it myself. I had a little video camera, which I would rent from the school for free. They were just nice enough to give it to me. And I would go shoot these little things and edit them myself, put music, and finished it on Final Cut Pro and deliver it. So the cost was nil, basically, just mini DV tapes. And I would pocket that money and save it for whatever expenses I had. I was lucky enough to stay at home. It was me and my father, living with my father and my grandmother. And so whatever expenses I had myself, car expenses, and whatever kana, and especially any film expenses and traveling expenses, I was covering all that, able to. And I had some student loans, which I was paying off with these gigs. I was a post-production PA on a couple of productions, but I hated that for a couple of months. That didn't work out. And then I started taking other gigs, like directing gigs. I did a couple of gigs for short documentaries on TV. So whatever I could do, but I was very specific that if I was taking something on, it wouldn't take my brain space. It was almost mechanical work that I could get away with, and I would pay the bills. And then at night I would write, or early mornings. Even like the script for Amal, the feature script, I was writing like mad on that while I was taking all these other jobs. It was really important to be able to, in a way, sustain myself. But I was also very lucky that I could stay at home at that time.
So before we come to the feature film Amal, I just wanted to quickly jump back a little bit and ask you about your influences, because if you, I mean, for those not familiar with Richie's work, I'm sure all of you are. No two Richie Mehta projects look alike. Each one is completely different and in its own space. The one thing that shines through, the only thing they have in common, apart from Richie being the director and sometimes Sean being the writer, is that all of them are imbued with a sense of humanity. Now, and this takes me back to what you said about people reacting to content and not form. So, were any of the great humanists of cinema any early influences on your work?
Very much.
You watched a lot of movies. Can you name some of them?
Well, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't even know where to start. There's so much. I can go into, look, I also, when I was in university doing my art program, I did cinema studies as a minor, which was, as you know, purely academic study of cinema.
Yeah.
And that's, worlds, we would spend 3-4 months just on Truffaut, 3-4 months just on Howard Hawks, 3-4 months just on Antonioni, just on Renoir. And so definitely these things seeped into my mind. Max Ophuls was a huge influence on me, even though he's as a filmmaker, a mix between form and content.
Yeah.
Kubrick was hugely influential for me, even though he's so heavily intellect over emotion, which didn't necessarily strike with this type of work I wanted to do. But what I loved about the stuff he was doing was that it appreciates over time. My favorite filmmaker to this day is an Australian named Peter Weir. His work was hugely influential because I believe all of his stuff is very humanist, even though it's rooted in genre, which is what I was identifying with the most. You can see there's a painting here I've done with films that influenced, when I was in art school, I put films that influenced me growing up, which, you can see the Shawshank, Empire of the Sun, Blade Runner. I mean, so there's really all kinds of stuff. Victoria De Sica had a huge influence for me on Siddharth. A lot of the Iranians, Jafar Panahi, I think is one of the greats of all time. I was constantly watching to update and upgrade what I was trying to take in. And to this day, I still feel that if I stopped watching everything contemporary and just went backwards, I still wouldn't be able to watch everything I want to see and everything that's worth seeing, that's masterful. So there was a lot there. But the stuff that I found influenced me the most kind of internally was the stuff about real life that I could relate to, that used genre in a very interesting and subversive way. Sometimes, you see something in film school, which is so beautiful and so potent, and you talk about it with people outside and they're like, what are you talking about? And it kind of breaks my heart because they'll never see it, no matter what I say, and they've never heard of it and they never will. And it stays in the academic circles and in the books and the textbooks. And that didn't sit well with me. So I started to feel, well, how do you get some of these beautiful ideas out into the mainstream? You package them in genre, you package them in a type of, you pace it up a bit. But you always have to be rooted in that sense of something that can be relatable and relevant.
Okay, so moving on to Amal, the feature version of Amal. Now, what was it? What did you feel that you hadn't said enough in the short that you had to make it into a film? I mean, the film is amazing as well. The feature film is amazing as well. So what made you develop it as a feature?
We were in Halifax, me, Rupinder, the lead actor, Bob, who was camera, VFX and everything, and who's also South Asian, and Stephen, my producing partner from school. We were in Halifax, sitting on the rocks, looking out at the Atlantic Ocean. It was a festival we were at for the short film. And I remember we were just taking a moment to just stare at the sun, I think it was a late afternoon sun, enjoying this adventure that we were on with this short. And it just struck me that I didn't even try on the short. It wasn't that I was phoning it in. It was purely an exercise. Just go with it and see what happens. And I felt like it was really resonating with people, and I wasn't done with the subject matter. I resonated with it so much with what Sean had written. And then my experience in Delhi doing the film, I felt would just add on top of it. So I said to those guys, it just kind of struck me, let's do it again. This was an experiment and it seems to really be landing with people. Let's do it again, not as an experiment. Let's put our everything into it and see what comes out of it as an experience.
And obviously, I have to ask you the obvious question. Now, alongside Rupinda Nagra, you cast Nasiruddin Shah as well, and is a living legend of acting. So, how did you get through to him, and how did he agree, and how is it working with him?
It's an amazing story. I got it. It's really actually my favorite story that I could possibly tell and experience. Sure. I won this pitching contest at TIFF in 2005. And that was a seminal experience for me of pitching it in front of the whole industry, getting them to come on board with the project. And we won $10,000 from Telefilm Canada, which is like the fund. It's not like, it is the funding body of Canada. And that's development funds to start packaging your project. And so I used that money to go to India with the blessing of the producers. And I went with the sole intention of finding Nasiruddin Shah, Roshan Seth, and Seema Biswas to try and convince them to be in the film with that money. So I went there and I parked myself in Bombay for 2 months. And I was staying with a filmmaker friend, a family friend, and who shall remain nameless. And he had worked with Nasir a while earlier, but I didn't want to use that favor. It wasn't worth it for me. Because as you know, in an environment like that, you ask for, there's a bit of a mafia thing. You ask for something and then your foot's in the door and they can ask for something back. And I didn't want that. I wanted to see if I could track him down. In a more pure manner. So I got there, and 60 days I was going to spend to try and track this guy down, especially Nasir. He was the priority. And the second day that I was there, it was the host I was staying with, was his birthday, and he invited me to the temple with his family. Said, we're just doing a puja. Do you want to come? I said, sure, I'll come. There's nothing else to do. I'm still going through my Rolodex to figure out who to call to get to Nasir. And so I went. And then after the temple, he said, I'm going to the office, beta, do you want to come? I said, yeah, I could use some internet access, so yes. So I went to the office with him, trying to rack my brains about what to do to get to Nasir. And we got there, and he got out of the car, and I got out of the car, and his secretary was standing with him and said, here's your itinerary for the day, sir. Your first meeting is with Nasiruddin Shah in 5 minutes. And I'm like, ooh. So I said, I just, in my mind, like, I just have to stand here. Just don't move. And he should come to me within 5 minutes. So I heard that and I just froze. And then that guy, the family, he just walked inside his office. He wasn't paying attention. I just stopped and waited. And about 3 minutes later, the car pulled up. He got out. I said, Nasir, I came here looking for you. I'm from Canada. And I have a film idea. And in the 15 seconds we walked to the office, I pitched it to him. And he was intrigued, and he said, here's my email, come see me tomorrow.
Okay, so, I mean, I've heard of elevator pitches, so this is like a walkway pitch.
And that's what that first 2 weeks of school taught me. The pitching, the importance of pitching and adapting to this. This is literally a walkway pitch, elevator pitch, yeah.
Amazing. And obviously, how was it working with all these people?
And Nasir was a dream to work with, understandably. He was going through a tough time. There was an accident with his son at the time on a local train. When we were in production. He was very gracious to come to set and still work with us during that very difficult time. In fact, in the film, he actually wears a Superman T-shirt as just like he has a shirt, but underneath it, he's wearing a Superman shirt, which was his son's. And the idea being his character is also steeped in regret as a character, as this old man, about his relationship with his own kids. And not that Nasir had the regret, but we just incorporated some emotions that he was feeling about his son. And he was really a dream to work with. I mean, I learned so much from him. One of the things about him and Roshan and Seema I learned was working with truly professional actors who have more set experience than I'll ever have in my life. You don't have to say much. You don't have to do much. You just let them do their thing. And most of the time, they're really, really right on mark. And if you get in their way, you're gonna annoy them and also hurt the performance. But if you just back off, let them do their thing, give them the stage to perform because they know what they're doing and they love and they're because they love the text. and then you'll get exactly what you need and better.
From a practical point of view, as someone coming in from Canada, obviously this time when you made Amal the feature, you were not shooting on the fly. You had to get permissions and things
Correct,
like that. So how did you get that? Because I know, did you get a seriously good line producer who did all that for you?
Yeah, we did. This guy, Jasbir Sahani, and his brother Manjeet, they were actually, they work on documentaries with the National Film Board of Canada. And one of our executive producers, we had two producers, David Miller and Stephen Bray. David recently passed away a couple of months ago, which was really, it still struck me very hard. And David's uncle, Peter Starr, had worked with the National Film Board of Canada for decades with David. And he had worked on a documentary about the shipbreaking yards of Alang. And he had worked with Jasbir and Manjeet, these brothers, these Sardarji brothers out of Delhi. So he connected me with them on one of my first development trip. And they'd never done a fiction drama feature, but they'd done docs, high-level docs with the National Film Board. So we figured, you know what, I'd prefer this. I don't want people who are going to charge us a huge premium, do everything for us. We don't learn anything. And they were very kind people. In fact, they got us permissions from the ministry shoot in India before we even hired them, just to test as a gesture of goodwill. The hard part was done. I gave them the script and they said, do you want us to try to get permission? I said, well, we'll talk first, see if you like it, and then we'll talk about a deal. And they went and got it and said, we got the permissions, by the way, just in case, you don't have to hire us, but here you go. I said, oh my God, these guys are, they're like Amals running around, very honest, wonderful people. So we became friends. And they got us everything we need. And it was very ragtag. We made it up as we went because they weren't experienced in the world, neither were we. But we got it done. And it was not easy. I mean, it was very stressful, but it was wonderful.
So, I mean, for the benefit of those who don't know, this was done long before the Film Facilitation Office was inaugurated, which is now up and running and has a website. So it's meant to be a single window clearance.
Yes.
So,
this wasn't the case, no. This was a lot of meetings, finding the dingy corner office somewhere, somewhere in some government building in Delhi. It was a lot of hustling.
Now tell us about Amal. The short film went places, but Amal, the feature film, went to even more places.
That's right.
So tell us about that journey.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was a journey to make it and finish it. And then we were lucky enough to get into Toronto as a premiere. And after that, it went everywhere, all over the US, all over Europe, started going over Asia. I didn't get a chance to go to China, Japan, to the Far East very much with Amal. It didn't reach I mean, it did actually, went to Shanghai, but I couldn't follow it. Took me to North Africa, took me to Algeria. I mean, it took me to all kinds of places, islands and, off the coast of Madagascar. It was a real adventure. It took me all over the world. People were really identifying with the film. And that's not to say it was a huge financial success. It wasn't. I think it broke even or made just a bit for some of the investors, but it wasn't, I think it just broke even, in fact. There was no profit to be made from it. It was a small film and it was a modest film. It got, the remake rights got bought by Oprah, and she had hired my brother and I to write a remake, which was going to be a kind of a big Hollywood film, but then that didn't end up going anywhere, but the deal was made, which was nice. So it really did, career-wise, it certainly opened every door for me, but the more important thing is it just gave me the life experiences I wanted. It allowed me to engage with very sophisticated audiences around the world with ideas I wanted to discuss.
Now, from what I know of you, you spend a lot of time in prep and research and everything. And consequently, if you were to look at your career from a God perspective overhead, typically there's a 3-year gap between your projects. Yeah, so, and I'm sure it's not by design.
It just happens, yeah.
Yeah, so is it because you spend a lot of time getting everything absolutely right and down on paper before you go ahead and make it?
I don't know, actually, no. It's very strange because after every film, when I did Siddharth and I'll Follow You Down, another science fiction film and another film shot on the fly in India, very much like the short Amal and System of Units. Yeah. I released those at the same time. And so there was a 5-year gap between those and Amal, but then in the span of a few months, 2 feature films came out. So it's very strange. Even now, I mean, the pandemic has affected what I would be shooting after Delhi Crime, but I think for my own stuff, if I'm writing a script, I really need to first take a little bit of time away from what I've done, get it out of my system, learn from it, digest it, and then continue on, usually with an idea I've been working on already for a long time. And then I pick it up and dust it off and keep going. But also, usually I'm pursuing 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 projects at the same time. And who knows which one lands, when it lands. I mean, after Amal, I actually got hired by Disney India to go shoot what would have been Disney's first live action kind of film in India. And I spent about 9 months on that. 6 months in development in Toronto on a script, rewriting something, and then 3 months on the location, and then it got canned. So that was a 9-month experience, which had nothing to show for it except life experience, which was valuable for me. Because it led to Siddharth, directly led to Siddharth.
This was not a fantasy film, right?
This was this was a sports film, a cricket film. It was like Bad News Bears with cricket.
Okay. Because eventually the first live action one they made was a Telugu film called Anaganaka Koroju. So
that's right. It was around the same time. That was in development when I was there. In fact, that was announced right, I think the week or 2 before I left when we were shut down. But yeah, there's been a lot of, I wouldn't say false starts because they all led to what eventually became. I mean, I was writing something else, completely immersed when the concept for Delhi Crime landed on my lap. So it's this. What I tend to do is listen to the winds, and I actually don't dilly dally. I don't sit. I don't stare at the walls. I don't take vacations. Usually, as soon as a film is done, I'm on to. I just love working, so I just roll into the next thing. And that next thing has its journey, or the next few things have its journey.
So before we go to Siddharth and I'll follow you down, I want to ask you about a project which I know nothing about. Okay. In your credits, there's something called a TV credit called Spirit of South Asia. Now I know nothing about this, so can you tell us about it?
That was one of the gigs I did, to pay the bills. Although it was really a fruitful and wonderful project. But yeah, that was a documentary that profiled South Asian people in Canada doing very interesting things. And so they were kind of 5-minute documentaries done for a station in Toronto. I mean, it's Canadian station, and it was nicely funded. But basically little doc projects. So me and the producer, we'd come up with lists of, let's profile this person or that person, this artist, this rap artist or hip hop artist, this painter, this person who's an environmental activist, and we would just do these profiles. And I would just go around town and meet these people and shoot these interviews, and then we had a team putting it together. So it was on the one hand, it was easy and pleasant. I was learning things. On the other hand, it was a very enriching project to do, and that's just part of. I realized during that project that if I'm going to take a gig for survival, if I take documentary gigs, they're much more enriching life experiences.
Amazing. So tell us about, you said that you work on 3 or 4 things at the same time, and you have something constantly, many irons in the fire.
Yeah.
So were you working on Siddharth and I'll Follow You Down at the same time?
Yeah, in fact, so I was working on, when I was finishing this Disney project, when it was shut down, the volcano had erupted in Iceland, and everyone was delayed around the world. And I was stuck there for another 5 weeks. I couldn't get back after they shut me down. So I just hung out. That was actually a hangout period because I just wanted to get home and continue my work and actually continue working on the script for I'll Follow You Down, start to develop it through telefilm and get producers attached and stuff. I was eager, but I couldn't. So I just spent time there thinking, and had an encounter with somebody, this rickshawala, in fact, who had lost his son, and it was very heartbreaking for me. And I mean, just to hear it, much less experience it from his side. And I just parked it as a life experience, which was tragic and typical in India in a way. Then I got back to Canada. I was developing the script since film school. In fact, I'll Follow You Down, I'd written in my screenwriting class, the first draft. and as a sample. And I just kept revising it and revising it. I couldn't quite figure it out. And then after coming back and living a little bit, I thought I had figured it out, and I kept writing it more, got a producer, went into the development and prep stage of telefilm. And then I went to Los Angeles to cast it, to meet some casting directors. And that was a 5-week trip, like my Nasir trip, but I was just looking for casting directors. And at night, after I would pedal the streets of Hollywood during the day and meet people, at night, I was staying at a friend's apartment and she was not there. So I was alone. This rickshawala conversation kept gnawing at me, and I just started writing. I didn't have any reason. I just started writing this film, Siddharth. And it emerged in a few weeks, the structure of it, very quickly. And so it was a very strange experience where I was developing I'll Follow You Down. It took a long time. It was a bigger budget. And then I found I had the script for Siddharth, something very personal. All the things I learned from Amal, the feature. We had a bigger crew, bigger budget, things we didn't need. I told you it was very difficult. I realized I could do something similar for 1/10 of the budget, and between me taking jobs like Spirit of South Asia and my 2 producers on Amal who had some savings, we just said, let's just put a fraction of that cost, a little money into it, just go shoot it. We'll sort out post later. So I had a 2-month gap in my I'll Follow You Down casting process, and I just ran to India. And we did it with a crew of 11 people, very slim cast. And we just shot it on basically, I mean, we had permissions, but barely. A lot of it shot on the fly. I came back to Toronto after shooting it. It was the most wonderful, happy experience I've ever had to this day, shooting something. Because there was no pressure. There was nobody breathing down our nose. We didn't really we had a schedule, but it was very loose. I came back, I started editing it. And then we got our cast for I'll Follow You. Gillian Anderson came on board, Rufus Sewell, Victor Garber, Haley Joel Osment, some amazing actors came on board. I was ready to go on I'll Follow You Down. I parked Siddharth halfway through the edit. I shot and edited I'll Follow You Down, which was a much more stressful experience because it had all the bells and whistles. And after I finished editing I'll Follow You Down, I just picked up Siddharth again on my computer, looked at it, the rough cut after 9 months away, knew what I had to do to fix it, finished the edit quickly, and then I did sound on both at the same time.
And Siddharth, especially, you know, it for those who don't know, it obviously it went to a lot of festivals, but most importantly, it went to Venice, and where it was nominated for a Fedora Award. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I mean that was a fairly early in your career, so that must have been a big deal for you, right?
It was. That week in Venice is really one of the most special weeks of my life. Not just to attend that festival, but to attend it with that project in the manner that we did. It was a very small feature film. It seemed to just land with people. It seemed to do to people what that conversation with the rickshaw did to me. To what I wanted. I just wanted to share what I was feeling, the complexities of it. It was a very special experience. It was life-changing. That eventually ended, that pathway ended up with me meeting my wife, actually.
Okay, so I saw it at the London Film Festival when it was premiered here. And
I was in Beijing at the time, otherwise I would have been there.
Yes, so but that screening went, in case no one has told you, that screening went down a storm.
I never knew. I never actually spoke to Kerry about that screening. I didn't know.
Oh, well, I'll ask him. It was amazing. I mean, there was not a dry eye in the house. So.
Wow. Now that I live in London, I actually wish I was here for that, I must say.
No, it was amazing. I mean, it was sold out. I think it had 3 screenings, all were sold out, and it was quite amazing. So let's quickly hop over to I'll Follow You Down. Now, that was in a sense a departure for you, in that it was not a South Asian theme. Now, you had done a science fiction film before, which was not a short, which was not a South Asian theme. So, plus here you were working with I See Dead People,
Yes.
and X-Files, and like really big, well-known actors. So, how is that experience? How did that contrast with making the small, intimate films like Siddharth and Amal?
It was. I mean, look. Here's the way I break it down. First of all, the cast. It is the least amount of direction I've ever done for a cast. Where you They know, I mean, Jillian has more set experience than I'll have in 10 lifetimes. She knows how to read a text and she knows what to bring. And for a lot of it for me is standing back and prep. Like you have conversations with a lot of these actors as human beings rather than just analyzing text all the time. But the thing with I'll Follow You Down, it's a Canadian union shoot, and it would be similar to any UK or US union. 20 days of shoot is all we could afford, and 10-hour days, because the 11th hour was spent traveling outside of Toronto for the Toronto crew. So you have 200 hours to shoot the film, and you don't have a minute more. We can't afford overtime. So in my mind, I have 200 X hours to shoot this thing, and it's literally a gun to the head. I mean, there are times where we were just running out of time, and I would say, I have 4 more pages to do. I can only do it in one shot. I have no time, and otherwise the scene doesn't exist. So let's just cut out the 10 shots I've planned to do it. We're going to do it in one, restage it. I hope it works. We have 5 more minutes to do it, an entire scene. These things would happen. And it forces you to be creative on the fly, but at the same time, it's also very stressful. Whereas an experience like Siddharth, which is so different, and something about being in India, and having a looseness to how you approach things, letting the staging decide how you do it, not having, you could shoot for 20 days or 24 days because you have a little bit leeway in your schedule, and people are willing to give you that leeway. In fact, as a result, I shoot faster. I was shooting 6-7 hour days on Siddharth, and we were running out of things to do, and we would just sit around and laugh and go out in the evening, and the film is just as long. I have the same amount of footage, but that's the difference. The difference is you know exactly where you're going to be all the time on a shoot in the West, and which is a great way to shooting studio films, for example. And a place like India, it is a real adventure. You have no idea what's going to happen, and that's a huge thrill. Also a stress of a certain kind.
So basically what you're saying is the process of shooting in India is more organic.
Very much, because you have to go, it's like a fast flowing river and you have to go with it. Versus in Canada or the US, you're damming the river and you're controlling the floodplain completely.
So speaking of organic, tell us about Organic Panic.
Another documentary series I took for money, which ended up being a great learning experience about the organic world. It was documentary short for the same station, in fact. And I go around Toronto and the Toronto area, interviewing people about the organic world. What is an organic pillow? What's a fake organic pillow? Things like this. So it was a huge learning experience, and I remember I would finish work. It wasn't stressful, but it was a lot of fun. And in the evenings, go home and write like crazy on my future scripts. It was another wonderful experience that I'm not embarrassed about because the quality was so high. The producers were so good. I never took a gig that I was embarrassed about, which I'm very happy about.
Well, let's talk about the poster behind you, India in a Day. So what happened first? Did you move to London first and then India in a Day happened? Or was that happening before you moved to London?
No, I was coming here because this woman I had met, who I was enamored with, I met her in a festival in Switzerland, and with Siddharth, and she was living here. So every time I go from Toronto to India, I'd stop here to see her and see if I could win her heart over. And so there was one summer, this is 2015, the summer of 2015, I was hanging out here as much as I could, staying with Rupinder, who had moved here. So that filmy, I'm telling that short paved the way. And when I couldn't see her, I was just doing general meetings in London to get to know the film scene here. And then I got a call one day from Scott Free, from Ridley Scott's company. And somebody I had met a few days earlier had recommended me to them because they were looking for a South Asian director for this documentary feature, and with no notice. I think everyone they called was just busy. So he was going through their list, and somebody said, call this guy, he's peddling the streets here, and he's not bad. So they called me and they said, hey, can you do this? And it would mean you'd have to be here for 10 months in London editing this project. I said, oh my God, thank God has come down and given me a work permit and a dream project. I mean, if I didn't know this woman, this is a dream project anyway. So it was a no-brainer for me to do this. And it allowed me to come and stay here then properly. And during the day, I was just working on something which was life-changing for me.
For those who are not familiar, you know, Life in a Day, as the series started, was by Ridley Scott's Scott Free Productions and Kevin MacDonald. So it's basically lots of user-generated films on YouTube, which are put together by a creative team. And in this case, they decided to take the, and this concept has, you know, traveled widely around the world. And India in a Day was, you know, specifically about India with user-generated films. So now, obviously, you're very familiar with short-form content, and you know your Toronto, the things you did for the Toronto station, where you are making the content yourself.
Yeah.
Now, how different was it to from making your own content to actually sitting in judgment of user-generated content and then deciding what to put into the film? Wasn't that like a huge pressure on you?
There was a pressure, definitely. The pressure wasn't, do we choose right? Because any human being would watch what we watched and respond emotionally to certain things and coldly or vacantly to other things. We had a team of people watching, first round watchers, and we would meet every week. I was watching, the editor was watching, and all these other viewers were going through everything. We'd meet and discuss all the good footage. There was a database of good footage and bad footage, and we would keep, I kept redefining what good meant, because sometimes it wasn't technical. It could have been awful sound and badly shot, but somebody saying something very authentic. That's what the biggest takeaway from me was, it was the next level, as I said, of content versus form. That now we've gotten to a point, this is 2015, so 13, 14 years after I did film school, that if you're watching something that's a true story, and Siddharth was my first experience on this, and you know it's true, it adds a whole level of drama and resonance to it that you cannot fabricate. If you can find relevance, something that's important to you, that speaks to you, that is true, and communicate it to other people, like you would watch on your phone a 5-second cat video, or an emotional story about somebody who's rowed across the Atlantic Ocean for a cause, like something that's real. It really gets to you as a 5-minute video rather than watching a 2-hour film about it. And these little bits of people were just pouring their hearts out on camera to us. And so the pressure was to do justice to the trust that they gave us, as well as to recognize that, to me, the future of storytelling in the world that I want to inhabit is in the world of truth.
So let me ask you a fanboy question. Did you get to hang out with Ridley Scott?
Not very much on this, because I think he was, I think he was doing he just finished The Martian. He was shooting one of the Alien films, Alien Covenant at the time. So he was busy, but his team was with me. And in fact, strangely enough, I met Ridley at TIFF earlier. At a press conference, all these small worlds. But yeah, it was an incredible fanboy moment to be working with him on this.
And on this India in a Day, you also got to work with Anurag Kashyap, right? Yeah,
Anurag and I have been friends for a while. We met in LA at a festival when he was showing Punch years ago, and I had a short there. And so, yeah, we knew each other. Anurag was instrumental. Anurag, Zoya, Akhtar, R. Balki, Shekhar Kapoor, they were instrumental in getting the word out in India. That was what they really brought to the project. Because if people didn't hear it from them that this is happening, they wouldn't have known to shoot footage in the far reaches of the country. So they were very gracious, all of them, especially Anurag, of getting the word out there and helping me. Because I didn't have a name. I was just this Canadian guy peddling the streets again.
Okay, and India in a Day can be seen in its entirety on YouTube, right?
Yeah, in HD. Google had financed the project, so it's there for anyone.
So now we come to what everyone is waiting for. Tell us all about Delhi crime. It is, and obviously it's based on a horrendous, real life incident which happened in 2012. So, I mean, it just sickens me to even think about it. But the way you approach the series and, telling it from, the woman the policewoman's point of view. And it was such a humane approach to the whole thing, and without a shred of sensationalism. because in lesser hands, such a topic could have become sensationalist and not true. But you managed all of that, and obviously you've reaped the rewards for it. It's won a it's won an international Emmy, and all of that. So how did Delhi Crime happen, and what drew you to that particular project?
So I was in Delhi in 2012 December. I was there on actually I think I was doing ADR. I was doing sound for Siddharth at the time when the crime occurred. And so, like anyone who was there, I was confused by it and shattered and uncertain, and I had all these mixed emotions. And your stomach sinks every morning. You think about it, and the protests began, and then turned to riots, and then the vigils at Jantar Mantar. And New Year's Eve, I walked around. I was actually walking with Rajesh Delang, who was lead in Siddharth, and been in everything I've done. And another actor, Akash Dahiya. We were walking around New Year's Eve that year, and I remember we were at India Gate. We went to Jantar Mantar, and then we were at India Gate, and we saw these 6 dummies hanging from a tree, which is the last image of the last episode of Delhi Crime I put in. And I remember thinking, I don't know what to feel about this. This is the worst thing. I feel like we're wandering around hell right now, where you have your own idea of what you would like to do to the men who perpetrated this crime, and then when you see it happening visually represented in these effigies hanging, you feel sick to your stomach. And basically for me, you found yourself in a position you just don't want to be in. It's like you wandered down the street and bumped into Medusa, and you looked her in the eyes, and that's the evil that was lurking. That's just seeing it. Forget about what Jyoti Singh would have experienced and her family would have experienced. I was sitting on that as a life experience. And then I went back and started writing something about it. I think a lot of filmmakers were, especially South Asian filmmakers, were very much inspired by this, and not in a positive way, of trying to sort it out. And in my world, when I try to sort something out, I do it through film. So I was trying to sort it out. I started writing something. I hit a wall in that screenplay where I didn't understand police procedure, and I needed to understand a little bit of police procedure from a plot standpoint. So next time I went to Delhi, a few months later, I met with a family friend of mine through my mom, and he was the commissioner of the Delhi police, just retired, kind of a few months earlier. After that case, he retired shortly after that case, and I met him to ask questions about this script I was working on, and like you, he does his preparation because he's a real cop and an investigator, and he's not going to meet with somebody unless he knows him. So he had seen my work. So he had seen Siddharth and I'll Follow You Down and everything. And in that meeting, I explained to him what I was trying to do and why I was trying to do it. And he said, "Beta, I've seen your films, and particularly I'll Follow You Down." He really identified with that, maybe because of the form, I'm not sure. And he said, "I've seen what you've done, and I think your idea is nonsense. Forget about what you're doing. I think you should do it head on. Do it head on. Do the whole thing. Don't do this roundabout way you're thinking of talking about it." And I said, "I don't think anyone should do that. Actually, I think it's too insensitive. It's too raw right now." And he said, "The verdict has just come out. Here it is. Take a look at it. It's a big 350-page document, which is the judge trying to sort out the sequence of events. And then why don't you just read it and meet some of the officers involved. If you think there's a story there, I'll open that world to you. And if not, no worries." He was very gracious about, and the idea to do it was entirely his. And I just, as a human being, the same person who saw those effigies hanging, said, "I want to read this document because I'm trying to sort it out still. It's so raw and it's so painful. I want to know what happened in detail." And I read that document and I was even more destroyed. And that's when I said, I have to meet some of these cops. And I just kept going down this rabbit hole and getting more and more into it. And then I met this woman, Chaya Sharma, who was a DCP of South District. She had been transferred. She was elsewhere at the time. And I'm like, this woman is like, this is the real one. This is the real life Wonder Woman. She's like a superhero. And I think if this story is to be told from the point of view of a woman, and this is the woman to do it. For me to understand it and for audiences to understand it. Because her and cops like her are the ones on the front lines, especially the women, who deal with rape every day, deal with these crimes against women every day. And we need to understand what's happening in their hearts. for us to get through this. That's how it began.
So, I mean, what was striking was that, as I've used the word too many times this evening, but, the whole, the humanness of it, it's not just, Vartika or Chaya Sharma's character, it's all the male cops, you feel for them, and you understand where a lot of the people are coming from, which really takes a lot of doing. So, did you do anything in particular to make them real human beings, as opposed to just people in a TV series?
Look, I mean, I just sat with them for a long time. I would sit in their offices for hours and hours and days at a time and chase them down. And as you know, I mean, you've dealt with administration in India. Sometimes you need something from someone, and they say, "Chalo, yahan pe baitho." But some other calls would come. Somebody else would come with a more important matter, so you just sit in the corner, watch. I would do that for hours and hours and days and months, and then turn to years with all of these cops. And those observations, those in-between moments when I wasn't interviewing, because when I interviewed them, I was asking about the case and their feelings about the case. And then I would observe what they were doing, like job shadowing. That's when my heart started going out to them as an outsider, observing, saying, oh my God, I mean, what you deal with on a daily basis, I couldn't deal with it for 5 minutes. And I don't know what your tolerance is, because you're dealing with also basically the scum of the earth on our behalf. And beyond that, all the other stuff that goes with it. That's when I started to realize that this is not just about the plot of what happened in the crime. This is about these people who deal with that stuff. And to understand these people, you have to understand their challenges on a day-to-day basis and the things they think about, the things they feel. That's the key to the whole thing, because and they don't talk to anybody. So if I can give them a voice through this project and we can understand them better, we can support them in protecting us, society, against this type of evil. It's a two-way street, the way I looked at it. So it was purely based on those observations of me just sitting in police stations and PCR vans and going along with them for months, years, in fact.
Yeah, and the level of detail was amazing, because the correct medals and the correct epaulets, the subdivision wearing the correct uniforms.
Oh, that was, I mean, our team, Smriti, who did the costume, she was so, actually, 1 second. I mean, this is the only thing I kept from Delhi Crime. It's hand-stitched with such care. Every IPS had it. I mean, it's the only there was so much love and attention put into this. I wouldn't have even known where to start, but every department head went so out of their way to make it so that we did honor to. And again, I'm not trying to defend the institution of the police in India or Delhi police or IPS. I don't know them enough. All I can do is defend these dozen or so officers for that week. And in order to do that, we had to get everything as accurate as we could.
Was there any pushback because you're coming from abroad to make this very Indian story, and or did they resent the fact that you're not Indian?
No. In fact, I think because I had built up the trust of these particular people, and also the family. I mean, it wasn't just cops; it was civilians around it too. But because I had built up the trust over time, I hate to say it, but and I don't know what it has to do with whether it was because I was from abroad or what. They would say, nobody's ever asked us these questions. Nobody's asked us how we feel. Nobody's sat with us to observe us. They recognize that. And so I think they looked at it as a nobody in Delhi cares at this stage. And everyone's too busy either. They're usually coming in here to yell at us for screwing up. But I didn't have that connection to them. I haven't been on the receiving end of a parking ticket or something that's really, a zoning issue in my flat. And I haven't been on the receiving end of that stuff. So I didn't have any of that baggage, which anyone in Delhi would.
I had a pretty, visceral reaction to it. I think I had just got off a 10-hour flight from Bombay, a daytime flight, came back home, and I'm like, okay, should we just start watching something? Delhi Crime is on today. That was the day it dropped on Netflix.
Yeah.
And and then before you knew it, it was next morning, and we had
Oh my
binged
God.
the whole series. And that's when I emailed you and the
Yeah.
producers. So
That's right. The next day, yeah.
yeah, so it really spoke to me. Now, it wasn't Delhi Crime wasn't you know commissioned by Netflix. You made it with a bunch of people, and then it was sold to Netflix,
Yeah.
right? So, what was the thought process behind that?
Well, look, when I started writing it, I pitched it softly around town, around Bombay, Los Angeles, Toronto, New York, and nobody cared about it. Most people were also, it was very raw at the time. So people still felt nobody should be doing anything about this. We don't want to see gang rape on screen, even though I was adamant about not showing it, but just the subject matter. Nobody was really interested, including the platforms at the time. So then I was fortunate enough to get connected by my agent to some financiers in the US, who then helped finance some of the writing process later on Delhi Crime. So I've written a Bible, which is a very detailed outline of every episode, and then a first episode script, and then we pitched it again properly. And everyone said no, again, including all the platforms. And they just said, sorry, it's just subject we don't want to deal with. And at that point, the project was dead. This was around 2016-ish. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I was there for, I think it was FICCI, for Frames, for conference, after Indiana Day had finished. And these two women, Apurva Bakshi and Pooja Kohli, who are old friends of mine, who you know. I met them
from Film Caravan.
Film Caravan. I met them on the festival circuit years earlier and really connected with them. And they had helped me get Amal and Siddharth out in India, because those films never got released in India. Because, as you know, festival films in the Hindi language don't necessarily resonate with lucrative theatrical releases in India. So they helped me get them out there. This is just to say, it wasn't overnight. Like, I made all the other films, and then you garner relationships, which then help you make everything over time. And these women, I told them about the project. They said, can we read it? I said, it's dead in the water. So sure, you can read it. And they read it. And the next day, it was 170 pages I sent them. The next day, they came back and said, we love this. We want to help you get this financed. I said, talk to these financiers in the US, because I think we're finished. I don't think we can anything we do. They went and met them, and they all came together and formed a new company together. And because those financiers were so inspired by what Pooja and Apurva were pitching as Indian women who resonated with the material and said, we think we can actually finance this all together, high risk, but based on Rishi's work, the script, we know what the quality of this is going to be, and we believe we'll sell this easily after. And they all took a gamble together. And it was the other producers, Jeff Sagansky, Florence Sloan, Harry Sloan, Aaron Kaplan, really kind of forward-thinking producers in the US, combined with them. And then we combined with another company, Sydney Kimmel, SK Global, which was Ivanhoe at the time. They were in India trying to get all kinds of things done and developing things. They came in as co-financers, Killian Gerwin and John Panatti, and their team. We pitched them after and said, would you want to come in for half? And they said, yes, we're in. Because they had seen my work over the years. They had read the pilot, the Bible and pilot. So everyone just had faith in it. But again, the lesson for me from a financing standpoint is the work spoke for itself. The work I'd done on the page and all the other films I had done over time all accumulated to be having faith, the right people having faith in executing it, because it was very high risk to do that.
And I'm afraid we are running out of time, so I'm just going to speed up things a bit. So season 2 of Delhi Crime is happening, but you're just you're like an executive producer on it. Yeah. You're not making it hands-on. And I think when we spoke last, you said it was like making 4 or 5 films back to back. Yeah, at once. Yeah. So now for one of your next projects, you're revisiting another horrific incident in India, the Gopal Gas Tragedy, which happened in the early 80s, and which is being produced by Ronnie Screwala's RSVP. So just can you quickly walk us through what's happening with that? And also you have like 3 or 4 feature films also cooking at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, the Bhopal thing is, obviously it was just announced recently through you. And Yeah, it's based on an incredible book, which Ronnie had optioned, 5 Past Midnight in Bhopal, and it's the kind of take I would have done if I was to do something from scratch. I would have gone to Bhopal for 6 months or a year and gotten to know as many people as I could around the tragedy, and then come up with something worth telling. And these authors have done all the hard work in the 90s when they went there and they learned about it, and not just it, they learned about people around it, people in the basti living beside it, vertically integrated, people high up, people kind of lower as the workers on the factory floor as well. They've done the work. And when I looked at the material, I said, this is incredible and more people need to understand it and see it. And in a similar way to Delhi Crime, where I can stand back and not judge it, where it's been presented there. So the challenge there is the adaptation, but it's, to be honest, the heavy lifting has been done on the research. So it's wonderful and sickening. If you haven't read it, or if people haven't read it and they end up seeing this, it is something that's sickening. But it really must never be forgotten, like the Nirbhaya case. It has to be in the constant public consciousness. And the only way to do that is to not make it as horrifying as it was. It will be horrifying, but you have to make it humane, like you said. If you can find the humanity in it, then people can find a way in. A few other films, Cutting for Stone, which is an incredible best-selling book, which I'm slated to direct, and Price of Tea, which is a China project I've been working on. Another life experience I had that week when you were watching Siddharth in London. I had an experience in Beijing, which was life-changing. So I'm trying to make a film about that. And I'm working on a series about elephant poaching in India, which is something that's very not close to my heart. I wish it didn't exist, if that makes sense. And that's in the vein of Delhi Crime, a procedural.
Yeah, I think we are now really over 1 hour. So just one last question. Any words of advice for the many aspiring filmmakers who are watching this? So what, just give them a couple of things to cheer them up and, life affirming words.
Just thinking about the subject of what we've been talking about, I used to think when I was a kid, this is early in middle school, early high school, I couldn't sort out in my mind, do I want to live the ultimate movie life or do I want to make the ultimate movie? I couldn't figure it out, what was what. And then over time now I've realized that if you work your ass off in the world you want to be in, you will end up making the ultimate movie for you and living the ultimate movie life. It'll actually all happen by itself. So to me, the lesson for me that I've learned is allow your life experiences to dictate the type of filmmaker you become. And the only way to do that is you have to leave your house. And obviously it's more difficult in the pandemic, but you've got to go out there and experience the world. And couple that with a plethora of labor. I have a rule in my life. I will never let a project die for lack of labor. If it's something that I'm not willing to do, that means it's not worth doing. But if the only thing standing in the way of me making the project is just hard work, and sometimes 10 times harder than I've ever done, that's easy. I just got to do the work. That's the easy part. So you have to be willing to do the work.
Thank you, Richie, for your time. And hopefully next year, you will be in BMO IFFSA with one of your next films, physically in person with a physical audience.
That would be so nice. I would love it.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Naman.
Thank you. Goodbye. Bye.